Have you ever heard of the FBI's biggest blunder? It involved a criminal mastermind who outsmarted the agency, leaving them baffled and empty-handed. Get ready to learn the incredible story of how he got away with it all. He was 6'9", over 300 pounds, and a known killer. Yet on a quiet Friday morning, he walked right out of jail, escorted by the very person sworn to keep him behind bars. On April 29, 2022, the Lauderdale County Jail in Florence, Alabama, experienced something no one expected. A dangerous inmate, Casey White, vanished from custody. He wasn't just any inmate. He was a convicted felon with a violent past and facing capital murder charges. But the real shock came when authorities learned how he escaped, with the help of someone on the inside. Casey White wasn't new to crime. In fact, by the time of his escape, he already had a long rap sheet. He had been in and out of jail for robbery, carjacking, home invasion, and attempted murder. But what truly elevated his status from just another criminal to national threat was his confession in 2020. While already serving a 75-year sentence, he told police he had murdered 59-year-old Connie Ridgeway in 2015. Ridgeway had been stabbed to death in her apartment in Rogersville, Alabama, a case that had gone cold. After his confession, Casey was transferred to Lauderdale County Jail to face trial for the murder. Now, Lauderdale County Jail wasn't some run-down place with broken locks. It was a standard facility, tight enough to hold inmates like Casey. But somehow, this towering man managed to slip through the cracks. How? That's when the name Vicky White enters the story. Vicky White was the Assistant Director of Corrections at Lauderdale County. She wasn't related to Casey, despite sharing the same last name. For 17 years, she had worked in law enforcement, respected, trusted. No red flags, no write-ups. She was even set to retire the very day Casey escaped. What happens next will leave you speechless. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss shocking cases like this one. On that morning, Vicky told staff she was taking Casey to a mental health evaluation at the courthouse. That wasn't unusual. Officers often transport inmates to appointments. But there was one big problem. There was no appointment scheduled. Once she and Casey left, the jail didn't hear from her. Hours passed. Worry grew. By the afternoon, officials realized something was wrong. A full internal investigation began. That's when the truth came out. Casey and Vicky were gone. Together. Law enforcement was stunned. Had she been kidnapped? Forced to cooperate? Or was this planned? Within 24 hours, the U.S. Marshals joined the case. Surveillance footage showed that Vicky had parked the patrol car in a nearby shopping center, where she and Casey switched to another car, a 2007 copper-colored Ford Edge, which Vicky had bought under an alias. It was clear this was a planned escape, but the signs had been there. Quiet signs. Fellow inmates told investigators that Vicky and Casey had formed a relationship while he was in prison. They spoke frequently. She gave him extra privileges. Some sources claimed she visited him on her own time. Even phone records from jail showed hundreds of calls between them. Digging deeper, investigators found that Vicky had sold her home a few weeks earlier for much less than it was worth. She withdrew thousands of dollars in cash. She had bought firearms. And she had been making careful preparations for weeks. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a deliberate escape plan. The FBI, U.S. Marshals, and Alabama law enforcement launched a nationwide manhunt. News outlets flashed their faces across the screen. Billboards went up. The case made headlines. Everyone was asking, how could this have happened? How could a man like Casey White walk free, helped by a trusted officer? But for all the noise, Casey and Vicky had a 6-hour head start. And in the world of manhunts, 6 hours can mean everything. The early investigation was intense. Surveillance cameras were pulled from all traffic lights and gas stations near Florence. Agents interviewed dozens of jail staff. Forensic experts analyzed Vicky's phone and computer. U.S. Marshals traced the vehicle she purchased and set up tips lines across the country. And slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. One of the early breakthroughs came from security camera footage showing Vicky buying men's clothing and toiletries days before the escape. She had also purchased a wig, indicating they were planning to go underground. They switched cars, likely more than once. It was clear they had a strategy: travel light, avoid detection, and stay moving. But even with the best plans, mistakes happen. And Casey and Vicky would make one soon. The FBI said it clearly: "We will not rest until Casey White is back in custody." The pressure was on. The public was afraid. And behind the scenes, the biggest manhunt of 2022 was heating up fast. For 11 days, a killer and a corrections officer disappeared into thin air. No trace, no phone calls, no credit card swipes. Just 2 fugitives, a stack of cash, and a country on edge. After Casey White and Vicky White slipped out of Lauderdale County Jail on April 29, 2022, it didn't take long for America to realize this wasn't a simple mistake. This was an inside job, a carefully planned escape that played out in broad daylight. Law enforcement agencies across the country joined forces. The U.S. Marshals Service led the charge, labeling Casey as armed and extremely dangerous. The public was warned: do not approach. Call 911. The heat was rising. The first 48 hours of any manhunt are critical. Investigators reviewed footage from jail security, nearby businesses, traffic cams, and phone records. They learned Vicky had bought a 2007 Ford Edge a few weeks before the escape, under a false name. The patrol car used in the escape was abandoned just 10 minutes from the jail. Casey and Vicky switched vehicles, likely wearing disguises. They had a 6-hour head start before anyone realized they were gone. This window of time made it hard to track them. They were likely out of state before police even started the search. The case exploded in the media. National headlines, true crime forums, talk shows. Everyone had theories. Some believed Vicky was brainwashed. Others saw it as a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde tale. But law enforcement didn't care about the drama. They needed hard leads. A $10,000 reward was offered by the U.S. Marshals. Then it doubled. Then tripled. The public was watching, and someone out there had to have seen them. That's when a tip came in from Tennessee. A 2006 Ford F-150 truck was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethesda, Tennessee, just 2 hours north of the Alabama state line. Security footage showed a man closely resembling Casey White walking away from it. The truck had been stolen days earlier. Authorities believed the couple may have used it as a second getaway vehicle, but later dumped it after mechanical issues. This sighting proved 2 things. 1. They were still on the move. 2. They were getting desperate. With no phones, no credit cards, and only cash, Vicky and Casey had made it harder for law enforcement to track them. But those same choices also limited their options. They had to rely on cheap motels, cash-only purchases, and quiet towns. That's how they ended up in Evansville, Indiana, a small city no one expected. Unknowingly, their luck was about to run out. On May 9, 2022, a local man working at a car wash in Evansville spotted a suspicious abandoned vehicle, a 2006 Cadillac. It had been there for days. He called the authorities. When police arrived and ran the plates, their jaws dropped. It was the car connected to Vicky White's alias. The fugitives were near. Officers began surveillance. Soon they spotted Vicky and Casey leaving a motel just blocks away. As they entered the Cadillac, the U.S. Marshals moved in fast. A brief chase began. The car sped through the streets of Evansville, trying to lose the Marshals, but the vehicle was soon rammed and overturned in a ditch. Casey surrendered immediately. Hands up. No fight. But Vicky? She didn't give them that chance. Inside the crashed Cadillac, she was found with a gunshot wound to the head. A .40 caliber pistol lay next to her. According to police, Vicky had shot herself. She was rushed to the hospital, but was later pronounced dead. The woman once known as a model officer was gone. The escape was over. America was left stunned. Casey was returned to Alabama the very next day, wearing shackles and surrounded by heavily armed officers. He showed no emotion, no regret. When asked by reporters if he had anything to say, he stayed silent. Authorities confirmed that Casey would face new charges, including first-degree escape. He was already facing capital murder for the 2015 killing of Connie Ridgeway, and now he was looking at life in prison without parole, or worse. But behind all of this was a bigger question. Why did Vicky White do it? She had been weeks away from retirement, had a clean record, owned a house, had a pension. Friends and co-workers were shocked. Some believed she fell in love. Others said she simply snapped. But the only person who knew the full truth was gone. Do you think Vicky White was a victim? Or was she just as guilty? Tell us what you believe in the comments below. We read every single one. When Casey White was dragged back into Lauderdale County Jail in May 2022, everything had changed. He wasn't just a murderer awaiting trial. He was now the man at the center of a national scandal. And the woman who helped him, Vicky White, once respected and trusted, was dead by suicide, just hours after their final capture in Evansville, Indiana. The escape that had lasted just 11 days had left behind a trail of chaos, confusion, and heartbreak that would take months to untangle. People across the country were asking, why would someone like Vicky risk it all for a man like Casey? Investigators combed through every detail of her life. Vicky had worked at the jail for 17 years. She had 0 disciplinary records. She was named Employee of the Year multiple times. She was known to follow the rules to the letter. But underneath the calm, Vicky was living a secret double life. Phone records showed she had been talking to Casey long before his transfer to Lauderdale County Jail. In fact, they had communicated for nearly 2 years, starting in 2020, when he first confessed to the 2015 murder of Connie Ridgeway. Even though there was no physical contact at the time, their connection grew through daily phone calls. Inmates told officers that Vicky gave Casey special privileges. Some said she flirted. Others claimed she often talked about a new life she wanted to start. When authorities looked into her financial records, they found that she had sold her house for $95,000, well below market value, emptied her retirement accounts, bought multiple guns, including a 9mm and an AR-15 style rifle, stockpiled $90,000 in cash for the escape. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a carefully planned operation. She told co-workers she was taking time off for medical reasons, but in reality, she had no plans of coming back. To those who knew her, the Vicky White they saw in the headlines felt like a stranger. Her mother said she had no idea Vicky even knew Casey. Her co-workers called it heartbreaking. Sheriff Rick Singleton described her as the most trusted person in the department. But love, manipulation, or desperation, whatever it was, had changed everything. People were quick to label it a prison romance, but mental health experts suggested something deeper. Some believed Vicky may have suffered from emotional burnout, loneliness, or even coercive control by Casey, but no one could say for sure. Vicky had taken that truth with her. In August 2023, Casey White was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the escape, and all charges related to the manhunt. In court, he admitted guilt and took full responsibility for the plan, but he remained silent about Vicky's involvement. Later that year, he faced a capital murder trial for the killing of Connie Ridgeway. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. Casey is now held in William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility, a high-security prison in Alabama, under constant surveillance. No visitors, no privileges, no chance of escaping again. At Vicky White's funeral, there were few people. No police honor guard, no public tributes. She was laid to rest quietly, far from the spotlight that had surrounded her final days. The story of Vicky and Casey remains one of the most bizarre prison escapes in U.S. history. It was not just about a breakout. It became a national conversation about trust, power, and human vulnerability. A 17-year veteran of law enforcement crossed a line no one thought she would, and a convicted killer walked free, if only for a few days, because of that decision. In the end, Vicky White's story became a tragic example of how one choice, one relationship, or one weakness can destroy everything built over a lifetime. Casey White is alive, but he'll never walk free again. Vicky White is gone, and the world may never fully understand why. If this story left you speechless, you're not alone. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life crime cases that reveal the hidden side of justice, betrayal, and survival. Like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Was Vicky a victim of manipulation, or did she willingly throw it all away? And remember, sometimes the most dangerous criminals don't escape through broken walls. They walk out the front door with help.